And we are live. Welcome to the NBA Strategy Show. It is Tuesday, March 12th. I am Josh Engleman here to break down a 7-game NBA slate coming in tonight. Late lock, 7:30 start. Two more games at 8:30. Two more games at 8, excuse me. One at 8:30, one at 9, and then two final late night hammers. Before we get started, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live, and follow me on Twitter at Josh Engleman. Also, big shout out to BetMGM for being the sponsor of this show. We will definitely talk about them in a bit. Good morning, everybody. What's up, chat? Fun times around these parts. Fun times. We got the interesting starting lineup last night. Freeman Liberty, not named the starter. Bruce Brown into the starting lineup. Swapped to a lot of Brown, but unfortunately, I needed more Dick. That is Grady Dick. I finished 4th last night in the big contest on DraftKings. We can just go ahead and hop to it so I can show you guys. So, if Bruce Brown in this lineup just happened to be Grady Dick, that would be 6 extra fantasy points, I believe. Maybe it's 5. Is it 5 or 6? What did he have? You guys tell me. I either would have finished 1st or 2nd, just by swapping into Bruce Brown. But, so very close. Happy that I snuck into 4th, but man, the difference between 1st and 100K and 4th and 5K is tough. It's just tough. But very, very happy. Shout out to Jokic, who didn't look great in the first half. Obviously turned it up a bit. 35, 17, and 12 with 8 stocks. The Freeman Liberty, man, that was... I hope you guys were able to take advantage. If you were in that contest in particular, I hope you were able to take advantage of the gift that we were given last night when that news happened. Because we're seeing right now these extra large field contests on DK, this $4 100,000 entry contests. People are not late swapping nearly as much as they should be doing. And we've seen this now for a little bit, but you really need to put that into practice. The moment that he was removed from the starting lineup, I did everything I could to get off of every single bit that I could. I ended up, I think, with like 5%. There were just some lineups that weren't ever going to be able to get changed. I originally had 60, 70%. The only thing that you can do in that spot is to massively, massively, massively get rid of everything. Because he went from being one of the premier value plays to like the 40th best option on the slate. But we knew his ownership would never move nearly as much as it should. His optimal rate post that news is minuscule, 5 to 10%. Yet he came in 40% owned. He is the most negative leverage, worst play on the slate if you keep it. And that's the key piece there. Run away from it as fast as you can. To a lesser extent, Trace Jackson-Davis was the same situation. Now, he had the opportunity and ended up playing really well and still had minutes available to him. But the moment you don't get him in that starting lineup, you have to negate that projection so much that the ownership isn't going to change enough in that particular contest. So if you can, for the next time they run it, which I assume is tomorrow, keep that in mind for late swaps. If we lose out, if something like this changes where somebody goes from starting to not starting in the late swap process, the most likely scenario for you, assuming the projections move like they have, is to negate that person in a big way, because they will be the biggest negative leverage option on the slate at that point. They are going to come in wildly, wildly overowned. So I was able to get off of most of that, and I think that was incredibly helpful. I did the exact opposite then, too. Bruce Brown was way more optimal than he was prior to that. But the ownership also isn't going to catch up in the same way. Bruce Brown ended up 16% owned. I think I went into lock with 45 or 50. Now, do I wish that I had a little bit more Grady Dick in that spot? Sure. But in this case, that went perfectly. Perfectly. This should be a lesson learned for everybody that's getting into that same contest. You got to be aware of the late swaps because there's 30,000, 40,000 entries that are just flying blind from the jump that are never going to update for anything. And that is very important information to retain. That gives you the edge that you're looking for. That's why late swap is awesome. All right, hit that thumbs up, guys, if you haven't done it yet. I believe it is time for us to get this bad boy started. Now, the first game that we are going to look at is the Philadelphia 76ers. They are 6-point underdogs in New York, 209 total. Now, I just finished up my sim. So I'm going to export my information, get it into my sheet, and then start off the site-based sim. So first and foremost, I'm going to export my first sim with my projections. I'm going to run a little script on the back end. Perfect. I just have to refresh two little tables here. There's one, and there's two. Do I have stupid exposure to any individual player? I kind of do, but not important for this moment. We can get this started, and now I can run the regular old sim with the stochastic projections on the back end while we get this one started. But for Philly, we're getting Tyrese Maxey back. He's 8,800. He's point guard, shooting guard eligible, and he's not that interesting. But it's not just Philly that's not interesting. It's kind of everybody that's not interesting. You can see it right now. I didn't get a single share of anybody from Philadelphia. And I don't think that's all that surprising. 1% ownership to Oubre, to Mo Bamba, to Paul Reed, to Tobias Harris, to Tyrese Maxey. Un. There is no ownership at all coming in to the Philadelphia 76ers. The highest optimal rate of any person on the Sixers is Tyrese Maxey at 3.9%. And that shouldn't be all that difficult to figure out because both of these teams are solid enough defensively. 27th in pace for Philadelphia, dead last for the Knicks. It's a terrible game environment. It's the lowest total on today's slate. It's rough. It's rough. I didn't get a share. I have nothing really else to add here for Philly. There's not any like news or anything that we're waiting on. Like everybody that's normally out is out. The highest owned guy on FanDuel is 5% to Mo Bamba. I've got nothing else to say about the 76ers in this spot. And if we hop over to the Knicks, now I'm going to be a little different here. Got to be honest. I've got a decent stand on Dante DiVincenzo. We do have one additional piece of information for the Knicks. We got a Q tag on OG Anunoby. He's been out for what feels like ages now. If we just look at the minutes table, I'm going to shift that bad boy back over for the show. Close enough. If we look at the Knicks and OG Anunoby, he hasn't played in over a month. If we get him back, he's 6,400. He's small forward, power forward eligible. Probably not at all what we're looking for today. But for me, I like a little bit of Dante DiVincenzo. He's 6,900. He's shooting guard, small forward eligible. Right around a fantasy point per minute. I went 35 minutes. Now, I have a higher points projection on Dante DiVincenzo right now. When I pulled rates, I felt like DiVincenzo's usage rate needed to be a little bit higher based on who's available and who isn't available. All of the old previous ball handlers, the Julius Randles of the world. So I am getting to a bit of DiVincenzo. He's 13% owned right now. I have 29. Now, when we get to later tonight for the deeper dive and for live before lock, I wouldn't be surprised if I have brought back Dante DiVincenzo a hair. But he is going to be the guy that I want to get to the most here from the Knicks. I went 35 minutes to Jalen Brunson. I still got over the field. He's 3% owned. I got 7. And I got a little bit of Josh Hart, assuming he continues to play 40 minutes. And we're kind of seeing the same thing in the boom bust tool. DiVincenzo's around 10% optimal. Josh Hart's around 10% optimal. Little bit of love, 5% optimal to Jalen Brunson. There's not a lot I want here, but I'm just heavier on DiVincenzo than I think most people will be. So he's sort of my first kind of GPP option for today on this 7-gamer. Now, I just got all of the lineups run and favorited in the sim tool. So now we can take a look at it from the stochastic side. And if we look at Philadelphia, it'll be the first team we want to look at. Not a single share of anybody. So whether I'm using my projections or the site projections, getting to the Philadelphia 76ers seems relatively uninteresting for today. If we take a look at the New York Knicks, it's pretty much the same situation. Our projection's not nearly as big of a fan of DiVincenzo as I am. So truth is probably a little bit in the middle. 3% to DiVincenzo, 2% to Hart. 2 lineups of Jalen Brunson. It's the same 3 guys that I mentioned. It's the same 3 guys that I have. I just happen to be a little bit more optimistic of the Knicks than we are. But if you're making a list, I personally am a bit bigger of a fan of Dante DiVincenzo than most. So not too much else to say here for this first game. Start thinking about who you think is going to score the first basket for Philly and New York. Probably do another odd shopper giveaway on the playback show tonight if you want to join us for that. But I think we go on to the second game. That's where things start to change a little bit. Whoo, baby. I have such a different projection here. Wow, this is going to be fun to talk about. Washington Wizards. They are 2-point favorites in Memphis, and it's a 219 total. Now, I am staggeringly low on Kyle Kuzma right now. He's projected for 32% ownership. At press time, that is the 3rd highest owned guy on DraftKings. I got to 3. However, the sim tool got to 66. Similarly, Tyus Jones projected for 30% ownership. I got to 13. He's projected in the sim tool. We got 45. I'm on a completely different wavelength here. I also did take Kyle Kuzma's under on Prize Picks. I think I'm a little light on the rebounding, if I had to guess. I'm going to take a quick peek at the player props for the Wizards right now. So on FanDuel Sportsbook, Kyle Kuzma's points prop is 24.5. I have 23.5. I will never complain about where I land. If I'm within a point, I consider myself to be close. Rebound prop, 8.5. Significant juice to the under drops him in at 8. So here's where I'm a rebound shy. That will let me, I will go back and dig into rebounding rates here. I think a lot of this will have to do with whether or not Richaun Holmes plays. He is questionable. 2 games ago, he wasn't and played well north of 30 minutes. Last time out, did not play at all. If Holmes is in, I'm not as big of a believer in Kyle Kuzma's rebounding prop that's in right now. So I think that's a little bit of the separation in that the betting line might be looking at Richaun Holmes being in a little bit more than I am. Or sorry, being out a little bit more than I am. So to start the day, I am less than enthused about getting to Kyle Kuzma in large field GPPs, even though he does grade out very well. I mean, we have Kuzma 27% optimal, 30% owned. I don't have much of a disagreement in that, but I think I'll be a lot closer to the field if Holmes gets ruled out. But if Holmes is in, I don't think I'm going to see it the same way. Now, right now, I'm getting to 11% of Richaun Holmes. He's 12% owned. I only went 26 minutes. We went to 25, 10% optimal rate. Seems about right. But Tyus Jones, another situation here. 6,200. We have him 23% optimal, 30% owned. So a little bit of negative leverage. I tend to agree. That's why I think I'm getting 13%. So I'm seeing the Wizards as a bit over-owned for GPPs. I'm a bit under the field on Denny Avdia as well, neutral to Bilal Coulibaly. But I think the big swing piece here will be Richaun Holmes and whether or not he's able to play. 0.9 DraftKings points per minute for Holmes. If he's going to get anything resembling normal starter run, that's great. If he can get back up to those 30 minutes, he's a fantastic play at that point. He is the guy that I'm second most exposed to from the Wizards. Now, the Sim tool is seeing it in a much different way, and we had that up there first. 66% exposure to Kuzma, 45% exposure to Tyus Jones. I have no disagreement in that they are very clearly the two best options from the Wizards. Then we got to 10. We're a little under on Denny. We're a little under on Rashawn Holmes. We did get a couple shares of Bilal Coulibaly. We obviously want to get to Washington. This Memphis team is dreadful, and they're missing even more dudes than normal, including Triple J, which is certainly not going to help anything on the Memphis defense. Their defense is held together by the fact that Triple J has been the guy that's been around all year. I will be taking a closer look on Washington later today. But for right now, in my notes, they're going to be more of a GPP fade. I'm going to try and find some better spots elsewhere at lower ownership numbers. Now, if we look at it on Memphis, I think our best bet is going to be to look at the injury report first. Buckle up, everybody. You might not even be able to see it all. You can't even see the whole injury report on the screen. That's insane to think about. Desmond Bane out. Brandon Clark out. Jaren Jackson out. Ja Morant out. Derrick Rose, Marcus Smart, Yuta Watanabe, Vince Williams, and Zaire Williams. They're all out. Scottie Pippen Jr. is doubtful, and we have a Q tag on Jordan Goodwin, John Conchar, and Lamar Stevens. We have no idea, none whatsoever, on what we're going to be able to do with the Memphis Grizzlies today. But if you project all of the guys that exist on the team and the ones that are questionable, you do get some ownership. 20% coming into GG Jackson. Call it 15-ish to Jake LaRavia, John Conchar, Lamar Stevens, Luke Kennard, Santi Aldama, and then close to 10 on Trey Jamison and Wenyen Gabriel. It's even more extreme on the FanDuel side. 25% to GG Jackson, 30 to Conchar, 30 to Stevens, 30 to Kennard, close to 30 on Aldama, another 20 on Trey Jamison. And we are seeing some positive leverage and some negative leverage, depending on who we're looking at. Like we have Jordan Goodwin 3% owned, 17% optimal. That's not going to exist like that. There's no chance that Jordan Goodwin is 2% owned if we think that he is in and playing today. That's just not going to work in that way. Those numbers will come close to each other. But I mean, we've got 13% optimal to GG Jackson, 20 to Santi Aldama, 15 to Kennard, to Goodwin, to Gabriel, to Conchar, up to 20. There's a lot to like here for Memphis because Washington's the worst defense in the league, and they play at the fourth fastest pace. So I'm getting to decent chunks of this game. And some of the pieces that I'm getting to are the guys that are in no matter what. I'm getting 32% of Luke Kennard. Very happy to do that. He's not on the injury report. I have to assume that he's going to play real minutes. He's probably the best player on the team. Yeah, Luke Kennard is the best active body on Memphis. 28%. Santi Aldama. Happy to get there. Now, has he been a great per minute dude lately? No. 0.85 over the past 30 days. Still want to get to him at 6,100, given the fact that they don't have much else that looks good here. If Kennard's not your best option, Santi Aldama is probably pretty close. 20% of Wenyen Gabriel. $3,600 center only. Now, he could go from not playing at all to playing a bunch if Lamar Stevens ends up out. I think in 18 minutes, looking at Wenyen Gabriel is a very reasonable option to get to. Now, we have him 13% optimal, 6% owned. Looks good to me. I got to 20% GG Jackson. I got to 10% Jake LaRavia. All of this is to say, you have to be interested in Memphis because of the matchup. However, we have 3 active Q tags and 15 other dudes out today. We need to pay very close attention to the Memphis ownership and the Memphis injury report, because that will change everything if we start losing some of these guys. Now, the Sims tool, similar situation. We got to 37% of John Conchar. We got to 30% of Santi Aldama, another 21 of Kennard. We also got to 16 of Wenyen Gabriel. Now, Sims tool is having us fade GG Jackson. I see it a different way. But we can't lock ourselves in to specifics for Memphis just yet. we have to sort of treat Memphis like we know we're getting there, but we probably don't know what we really want to do until 6 tonight. And honestly, we need to just cross our fingers and hope we get the news early, because for an 8 o'clock game, we don't necessarily have to get any information until like 7:30, which won't be fun. I'm hoping they figure out all of the Q tags first, and then we can figure out what a starting lineup will look like if we start hemorrhaging some of these guys. But for right now, we want to have a very close eye on Washington and Memphis. As best I can tell, this is the most exposed. Okay. This is the most exposed game overall. Technically, there's more exposure going to Houston and San Antonio, but Houston is pulling 90% of that ownership, so it's not exactly a game balance. It's all Houston because of Alperen Şengün being out. That's 2 games so far. No reason we can't just take a quick peek at OddsShopper and see if we have any bets. I've grabbed a couple already this morning, since now I can be in a legal sports betting state for North Carolina. We got one out there that we've already talked about. Josh Hart, under 26.5 points, rebounds, and assists, is minus 102 on FanDuel Sportsbook right now. And apparently it's already gone based on that refresh. We haven't talked this game yet, or this game yet, or this game yet. We haven't talked anything that I see on the screen. So that would have been nice to hand that play out, but it has gone away since it was posted. Hope you were able to get it. And now the line moved enough that it dropped it down to a 9 OddsShopper rating. But we'll take a closer look on some of those other props. Ooh, Josh Hart under 9.5 rebounds at Bet Rivers. Second best play that you can get. Already slowly but surely moving. See how quick it is? You got to be on it if you're using OddsShopper, guys. These lines can move quickly. You want to take advantage as fast as you can. By the way, schedule for the rest of the day. Very, very simple. We've got NHL Strategy Show at 2. I'm back for the deeper dive at 5:30. You get live before lock at 6:30. And then obviously we are back on playback at 7:30, where you guys can come watch the games with us using League Pass. If you have League Pass, great. If you don't, you have the opportunity to try and grab one of our 40 VIP passes where we can give you League Pass for the night so you can watch along with us. Stochastic, playback.tv/stochastic. Link in the description. Okay, next up, Indiana. They are 7-point underdogs in Oklahoma City. They are taking on the Thunder. 241 total. It's the highest total on today's slate. Now, that happens because Indy has the number 2 offense. Oklahoma City has the number 4 offense. However, we also know that the Indiana Pacers play at an incredibly fast pace, and their defense sucks. So we're certainly interested in Indiana, but it's a little scary. We've got 22% ownership coming into a $6,300 Miles Turner. He's been at 1.24 DraftKings points per minute over the past 30 days. I'm not projecting him to that rate, but he still looks good. Showed up in 23% of my lineups. We also have Turner, 19% optimal. That is the highest optimal rate of anybody on the Pacers. He's a bit less owned on FanDuel, where he's only where he is $6,800. That's $500 more expensive than the price on DK. Pascal Siakam looks solid, 7,300, small forward, power forward eligible. He's 15% owned. I'm just shy of that. He's also 15% optimal. I didn't really get to Halliburton at 9K. I did get to a little bit of TJ McConnell at 4,700. He's actually the 3rd highest owned guy on the Pacers. Doesn't make me feel good. Only a DraftKings play. He's $1,200 more expensive on FanDuel. After that, if you can get a couple shares of Jalen Smith, a couple shares of Aaron Nesmith, maybe a couple shares of Obi Toppin, I think all of those guys are fine. But I think the priorities for you from the Pacers are Miles Turner and Pascal Siakam. Now, if we look at it in the Sims tool, we got to 27% of Miles Turner. So both myself and the Stochastic Sims are on board with getting to Miles Turner. Both myself and the Stochastic Sims are on board with getting to Pascal Siakam. 2 most exposed guys in the Sims, 2 most exposed guys to me, and then very minimal shares of Halliburton, McConnell, and Obi Toppin. But we like getting to Indy. If the game's competitive, you're very happy to get these pieces, but OKC, obviously, 7-point favorites. That's the biggest line on today's slate right now. Oklahoma City at 7 points. They're the biggest favorites for right now. For the Oklahoma City side, interesting spot and a team that I am getting to in a big, big, big way. We are waiting on one piece of news here that will be very important. Jalen Williams is questionable with that right ankle sprain. We have him projected in. We also have 10% ownership going to Chet, Jalen Williams, Josh Giddey, Lou Dort, and SGA. I am treating this team in a very different manner. 17% of Chet, 38% of a $6,900 Jalen Williams. If he is in, I love it. This spot is amazing. I'm over the field on Josh Giddey. I have 13%. He's at 9. I have 39% of Lou Dort, $4,200, small forward eligible. At 0.79 DraftKings points per minute over the past 30 days. I only have him at 0.81 in 28 minutes, showing up as a key value piece at a position that's usually hard to fill. And on a 7-game slate where we don't really have a ton of pay down options yet. That's why we're seeing someone like Lou Dort show up with such great value. But I'm also finding it not that difficult to get to SGA. $10,500, point guard only. He's 9% owned. He's in 26% of my lineups. So I right now have 134% ownership going to Oklahoma City. We are only projecting 58. So I'm like 2.5x the field on the Thunder. We have Jalen Williams, Chet, Giddey, and Dort, all north of 10% optimal, all showing positive leverage. Only guy showing negative leverage is SGA, still 8% optimal. I'm very happy to get to OKC. It's an incredible spot. When you get to face the Pacers, it's the perfect setup because their offense is good enough to stay in games, but their defense is so bad that your offense is going to go nuts. That's what I'm looking for on a day like today. Do our Sims see it the same way? Sort of. Not as major of a stance as I have, but 17% of Shea, 13 of Giddey, 11 of Chet, 10 of Dort, 9 of Jalen Williams. We're still getting to OKC, but it's a little bit closer to the field than the major stands that I'm taking. Now, these numbers will wiggle throughout the day, and who knows? Jalen Williams ends up out. SGA might be in 50% of my lineups. That greatly changes his rates. But if everybody is in, this is the best spot on today's slate. You want to get to OKC. I'm a pretty big fan of what you can get to here. Any one of the starters look like borderline great, but at the very least, very good. Now, we'll go to game 4. That's going to be the Houston Rockets, 4-point favorites, taking on the San Antonio Spurs. And this is the first place where we have to talk about something very different. Alperen Şengün got hurt last time out. He's likely to miss the rest of the season. It's a shame, but he avoided a major injury. We also have no Cam Whitmore today. And those two items are really changing up the game for what we get to here. 66% ownership to Dylan Brooks across DraftKings and FanDuel. Now we have 49% ownership coming into Amin Thompson and none on FanDuel. FanDuel priced him up to 7,500. He's only 4,900 on DK. Now, it seems to me that I have him projected too low. I have him for 24 fantasy points in 23 minutes. We have him for 29 fantasy points in 24 minutes. Seems to me I may have missed a rate somewhere for Amin Thompson. Although I still have him at 1.05 fantasy points per minute. He's been playing a bit better than that lately. Maybe I need to give him another minute. But I did not get to him as much if he's at 49% ownership. We do have him with a pretty sizable negative leverage score. We do also have him 33% optimal. He's a guy that I'm going to dig into a little bit in the future. I will certainly have a bit more than 6%, but I would not anticipate having as much as 50, at least not on the surface. I don't believe we have any props for Houston yet. We do, but we don't have any for Amin Thompson. Frustrating. But I like getting to a lot more than just those two guys. Whether that's me getting to 27% of a 27% owned Fred VanVleet, or 24% of Jabari Smith, who's also 24% owned. I got 20% of Jalen Green, who's 20% owned. I want to get to a lot of Houston. This is the most owned team on the slate, and it should be. These guys are not priced for the way that this team looks with no Şengün. And it's a similar story on FanDuel. 50% ownership to Jalen Green, 40% ownership to Fred VanVleet, but they didn't price Jeff Green up, and the assumption will be that Jeff Green starts. He's 3,700 and small forward eligible on FanDuel, currently pulling 50% ownership. You got to get to Houston. You shouldn't be surprised. Not a great San Antonio defense. It's a pace up spot for Houston, and they're filling in for arguably their best player. Not arguably. They're filling in for their best player. I want to get here a lot. It's going to take me digging into Amin Thompson's rates again because the sim tool is Team Amin Thompson. 99% Dylan Brooks, 77% Amin Thompson, 26 to Jabari Smith, 14 to Fred VanVleet, just 3 to Jalen Green. Now, Jalen Green sees a wild usage rate bump with Şengün and Cam Whitmore not around, like 36%. I cut it to 32, and I might still be a point high. But I'm interested in Jalen Green. Now, the $7,800 price tag is not as appealing as I would like it to be, but he's been a fantasy point per minute guy over the past month. He's getting a usage rate bump by just being in this game, and he's got a stellar matchup. They gained 3 possessions over their average. Even at 7,800, I'm still a pretty big believer in Jalen Green. If we happen to get Jock Landale starting, he's 4,800. We're probably not going there one way or the other. Even in 24 minutes at, call it 1.05, we'll call it 1 fantasy point per minute. That's 24 fantasy points at 4,800. We're talking about a guy that would be like a 5x play, be like a 10% owned guy. Nothing crazy. Not a guy that I want to go crazy for, though. BMAC, Jeff is small forward eligible on FanDuel. This will really only affect Jeff Green on the FanDuel side if they go to Jock Landale, but my expectation is that they're going to Jeff Green. Or potentially, now if Cam Whitmore were healthy or Tari Eason, I think they would actually go to Jabari Smith at the 5, but I don't think they have enough bodies right now to actually do that. But that would be like my third choice. So that's 4 games down now. We'll hop to Odd Shopper. We have Fred VanVleet under 4.5 rebounds sitting out there at minus 115 on Bet365. Second best play you can get on Odd Shopper right now. That's a 12 Odd Shopper rating. You can also get under 1.5 threes for Aaron Nesmith at Fliff. That's at plus 145. Might have already disappeared. Clarkson's popping up right now if you can grab that quickly. We haven't talked about Utah yet. What we do want to talk about, though, is you guys hitting the like button. Helps me out a ton. Very easy to do. Hit that thumbs up. And then sign up at BetMGM. The number 1 play on Odd Shopper is at BetMGM right now. That's Jordan Clarkson under 18.5 points plus 100. You could grab that and immediately just put one of your bonus bets down. Because if you click the link in the description, and you sign up at BetMGM, bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets. That's 3 separate $50 bonus bets. Your worst case scenario is losing $5 out of your own pocket, even if you drop the first bet and all 3 bonus bets. You pick up 1 bonus bet. Like you pick up that Jordan Clarkson one right now. It's $100 into your account if it wins. You pick up another one. Maybe you want to go to a bigger underdog. That one wins. You're up to $200 now. You pick off a couple of those bonus bets and you're starting off with a really nice bankroll at BetMGM. There are plenty of more plays on Odd Shopper if you're interested in them. You got to be 21 or over. And if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call and text 1-800-GAMBLER. That will help me out too. What's the line for how many times Wemby calls for the ball in the post? Not a lot. Not a lot. We got to remember, if they start Jeff Green at center, they're probably not just single covering Wemby in the post. They're going to be sending doubles immediately. So could be a good day for an over in Wemby's assist prop, but we got to remember that they're not just going to let somebody die on the vine while Wemby just throws in 3-foot hook shots. Okay. 3 more to go. Boston Celtics. 6-point favorites in Utah, 233 total. It is basically impossible to talk about this game right now. Celtics are on a back-to-back. We know that we had no Drew Holiday and no Kristaps Porzingis yesterday. Since this is a back-to-back, we can almost guarantee that there will be no Al Horford. Yeah, John P., that's a great one too. Certainly could be Brooks on Wemby if they want to hide Jeff Green on Champagne or whoever you want, whatever guy you think is doing the least. Sohan for sure could very easily do that. You can go a couple different directions. I wouldn't be surprised if they use Brooks a little bit on Vassell as well, but either way, the whole team is going to be tasked with guarding Wemby. For Boston, though, we have no idea who's going to be in. I mean, the whole team had Q tags yesterday. I wouldn't be surprised to see some of them have a Q tag again today. I also wouldn't be surprised to see 1 or 2 of these dudes end up out in this spot. For right now, we have around 10% ownership going into Tatum and Brown and Porzingis. A little bit more limited on White and Holiday. Basically the same story on FanDuel. You're only playing any one of those 5 starters. I got to 6% Jason Tatum. I don't really have much else to say for Boston because of this back-to-back. We just don't have enough information. Oh, I did skip San Antonio. Pat J, thank you. Apologies. Let me finish off Boston, and then I'll hop back to San Antonio. I just knew, there's not a lot of ownership coming into San Antonio, so I know I don't have a lot to say. If we look at the sim tool for Boston, it's the same situation as what I'm getting. 8% to Tatum, 3% of White, 3% of Brown, 3% of Porzingis. We need their injury report at 1:30 or 2:30 whenever it drops, probably 2:30. And we're going to need whatever news to see who's in or out. We could create a bunch of value with Peyton Pritchard, whose price went up big time, or Sam Hauser potentially. If we happen to get Porzingis out again, then it's going to be a really big Luke Cornett / Xavier Tillman day. We can only hypothesize that stuff right now. It's not really as actionable. Now, as I hop back to San Antonio, we have 11% ownership coming into Devin Vassell, and then no more than 4 to anybody other than Wemby. We have 7.5% optimal rate to Wemby as the highest mark on DraftKings. Actually got to 10% of Wemby and 13% of Vassell, but basically nothing else. And it's sort of the same story on the FanDuel side. Only 21% ownership coming into San Antonio. That's the second least amount of ownership to any team. So this is sort of why I skipped San Antonio. I knew they were uneventful to talk about. And you could see it in the Sims tool as well. 4% ownership to Wemby, 4% ownership to Devin Vassell. Looks good to me. Don't have much interest in San Antonio in that Houston spot. I knew we could get through it pretty quickly. On the Utah side of this Boston matchup, Utah is a little bit different. They have no Taylor Hendricks, no Lauri Markkanen. Otherwise, it's what we're used to. 25% ownership coming into a $4,900 Walker Kessler. Got the start last time out. I'm assuming he does again today. I only went 24 minutes. We did the same. He's 17% optimal, 25% owned. I got to 23%, and then it's just single digits of everybody else. I think Bryce Sensabaugh and Colin Sexton, John Collins, Jordan Clarkson, Keontae George all look really similar, but I also see them as like 5% owned plays. And we're seeing the same situation in their optimal rate, 7, 5, 4, 4. Not a lot to get excited about. So I don't have any more than 5% of any of these guys, except for Walker Kessler. Kessler is also 6,100 on FanDuel. Way less interesting than the $4,900 price tag that he's pulling on DK. The Sims tool mostly sees it the same way. 41% ownership or exposure coming into Walker Kessler. Very nice positive leverage play for us based on that pool ownership. And then just a couple shares of Colin Sexton. No real stands to Utah. That might end up looking a little bit better. If we lose 1 or 2 guys from Boston, this line will move a little bit closer. It will make Utah look a little bit better. That's my expectation. But for right now, Walker Kessler is the key takeaway because we don't have great value. He's a 1.05 fantasy point per minute guy. potentially going up against two guys that he's better than. Like, if we don't get KP, it's a pretty nice spot against Luke Cornett and Xavier Tillman. But he is the priority from Utah. There are no other priorities from Utah. Oracle of Sales. No Al Horford. Like, no minutes. Correct. I would not expect Al Horford to play today, regardless of the status of Kristaps Porzingis. Doesn't matter. They're going to sit Al Horford today, I would imagine, no matter what. Assuming, not even assuming. They're just, if KP is out, they're going to go to Luke Cornett and Xavier Tillman for all of the center minutes. All right, Minnesota Timberwolves. Tough team to talk about here as well. This is mostly just going to be hypotheticals until we get the news that we are looking for. Because if we look at Minnesota in the injury report, can I make that a little bit bigger? I can. Close enough. Q tag on Kyle Anderson. Q tag on Anthony Edwards. Q tag on Rudy Gobert. Q tag on Monty Morris. And we already know that Karl Anthony Towns is out. So we've got around 15% ownership coming into Gobert on DK and FanDuel. Around 10 for Kyle Anderson on DK, around 15 on FanDuel, and then another 13 for Mike Conley. Minimal ownership to Edwards. Only guy that got to double-digit optimal is Rudy Gobert. We don't know who's going to be playing here. It completely changes the entire scope. You know, if Kyle Anderson gets ruled out, if Anthony Edwards gets ruled out, someone like Nickeil Alexander-Walker will jump in a big, big way. Hard for us to dig in. I got to 9% of Gobert. I have no problem at all getting to more of Gobert. The Sims tool certainly had no issue with it. 40% exposure to Rudy Gobert in the stochastic Sims right now. And then basically nothing for Conley and Kyle Anderson. Not a single share of Anthony Edwards. Up to 9,700 now. We need more information. This is not an easy spot against the Clippers either, particularly when you're missing Towns and potentially missing more of your rotation. But we need this news. Good news is, even if we don't get it until late, there are 2 games at 10 o'clock. We'll have plenty of options for late swaps. This should be a good thing to anybody wanting to play tonight. Ambiguity in the late games is your best opportunity to create additional value. On the Clippers side, 8% ownership to Kawhi, 7 to Zubats. They're around 10%, and that's where we're at on FanDuel as well. Harden, Leonard, and George, all around 10%. We see Kawhi just crossed the 10% mark for optimal rate. Zubats is knocking on the door. Paul George is at 8. I got to a little bit of these guys. I doubled up on Zubats. I got 14%. I doubled up on Kawhi. I got 16%. I got enough Paul George and James Harden for me to be like, okay, I'm getting to the right pieces of the Clippers, but I don't exactly have a ton of any individual. And I think that makes some sense. Minnesota's defense is fantastic. Not the best matchup in the world for the Clippers. Sims tool showing us 13% of Kawhi. So right along where I'm at. 10% of Zoo. So right along where I'm at. 9% of Paul George. Similar story. Didn't get to any James Harden. I think that's all right. We do have James Harden with a little bit of positive leverage. 4% optimal, 2.5% owned. There aren't any major priorities from the Clippers. But if you want to go to any of their big 3 or Zubats, that's a spot that I think looks pretty good if you're looking for it. We lost out on all of those interesting Clippers bets. You can get under 32.5 PRA at Hard Rock for Rudy Gobert right now. Fred VanVleet's rebound prop is still there for under 4.5 at Bet365 if you want to grab that. Not much else to talk about for those games. So we're sort of on to the final item for today. We have one game left. That's Milwaukee and Sacramento. 237 total. And we're getting Bucks and Kings. Decent spot. Or we could just think about signing up for OddsShopper. I know I'm talking about it a lot on this show, and it's a little bit of a crossover into the DFS space. But, I mean, if you're willing to play DFS, at the very least, you're probably interested in pick'em sites. Maybe you're in a sports betting site. It's an easy way to get a little bit more volume in your life. $14.95 a week for OddsShopper. That gives you positive EV bets. It gives us the daily expert picks. You can use parlay builders to get plus EV parlays. We have real-time fantasy projections for OddsShopper. That's giving us the market-based approach to beating the books, and it allows you to get into our Discord. So you can get it for $14.95 a week. You can get it for $49.95 a month. Or sign up at one of our offers. You can get 2 months of OddsShopper Premium. If you take this offer for BetMGM, which is on the screen, you can get a month of OddsShopper Premium if you haven't signed up for Prize Picks yet using this link. You can get another month of OddsShopper Premium if you want, if you haven't signed up for Jock Market yet. All of these spots have either bonus bets or deposit match bonuses. It's all here for you on oddshopper.com. Just click on OddsShopper and then click the Join OddsShopper button. You'll see that entire list of prices. We close it out now with the Milwaukee Bucks. 2.5-point favorites in Sacramento, 237 total. And it looks like we might be getting my boy Chris Middleton back. He has missed a very long time with a sprained ankle. He's 6,500, small forward only. We will not be playing him today. 10% ownership to Malik Beasley. That should explain how little value we have. Around 6% ownership to Dame and Giannis. They both get to 10 to 15 on the FanDuel side. Only Malik Beasley crossed 10% optimal. Giannis and Brook Lopez just a little bit shy of it. It's a great spot. 20th ranked defense for the Kings, 9th in pace. But these guys are priced where they're supposed to be. And we're bringing back a relatively high usage guy into the rotation, even if Middleton's not there. No standout plays for Milwaukee. I'm happy to get to any Dame and Giannis that I can, but I prefer the other pay-up options on today's slate. I think the guy that you're looking at is Beasley. And as we get more value, I think we just kind of stop paying attention to Milwaukee. They're not nearly as good as they'll seem if Middleton stays in. And we're seeing the same thing in the stochastic sims. 9% of Giannis, 9% of Malik Beasley, a couple shares of Lillard, Lopez, and one individual lineup with Pat Connaughton. It kind of matches where I'm at. Would I mind having more Milwaukee? No, especially for a late swap scenario. Will really help moving things around for Minnesota and the Clippers and potentially the Kings. But the pricing for Milwaukee right now is pretty efficient. Then we close it out with Sacramento. They're also in a decent spot. Similar defensive rating and pace, although Milwaukee's defense has been a little bit better now under Doc. I think it's a little bit more shooting luck than anything else. We're seeing 15% ownership to Sabonis. Around 10 for Herter, around 10 for Murray, single digits for Fox and Monk and Trey Lyles. I got to 20% of Keegan Murray. Got to 15 of Sabonis, around 10 for Fox. Fox price up to 9,100 now. 1.32 DraftKings points per minute over the past 30 days for Fox. It's almost shouting down the 1.59 we're seeing for Sabonis. But I'm getting to a little bit of that Kevin Herter value. Now, that's one that's pretty scary. His minutes are a yo-yo right now. 25 last time out, 17 and 12 in the two previous games, 23 before that. I went to 24 minutes. If he's shooting well, he could shoot himself into more minutes for sure. Certainly fine with taking a flyer on him. Don't mind getting to some of that Trey Lyles at 3,600. Like I mentioned before, we don't have a ton of value, but I just like kind of getting to Sacramento. I mean, I'm getting over the field on Murray, 2xing Murray, 2xing Herter, 2xing Fox, neutral to Sabonis, neutral to Lyles. That all looks really good to me. Sacramento, 75% exposure. That's my fourth most exposed team. Like, I'm really enjoying the idea of getting to the Sacramento Kings today in a pretty decent matchup. Plus, that also helps my flexibility for the late swap. Now, for Sacramento in the Sims tool, basically the same story. 13% of Sabonis, 13% of Murray, only 6 of Fox, only 6 of Herter. So I have a little bit bigger of a stand on those two guys. We do see Lyles and Monk sneak into some lineups. No overwhelming priorities for Sacramento, but definitely a group of guys that you want to work in because 237 total. This is the second highest game total on today's slate. We want to have some of it for sure. Let's go ahead then and sum up DraftKings. Since I forgot to do it yesterday, we can do it right now. This is what the sim tool looks like overall. We have 99% exposure going to Dylan Brooks, around 75 to Amin Thompson, around 65 to Kyle Kuzma, Tyus Jones, Walker Kessler, and Rudy Gobert all got into the 40s. John Conchar and Santi Aldama got into the 30s. The number one ROI lineup to start the day: Amin Thompson, John Conchar, Pascal Siakam, Santi Aldama, Kuzma, Dylan Brooks, Jabari Smith, and Rudy Gobert. That is where we stand on DraftKings. You guys know what time it is now. For all the people that want to see it, shout out to FanDuel. Let's go ahead and run a FanDuel sim and see where all the people of FanDuel stand. We're up to 400 people in the door. Hit that like button if you're still here. And if you're a FanDuel fan, definitely hit the like button, because now you're getting the goods. You're getting the sim results to start the day. It's good stuff. I'm going to take a little sip of Gatorade while this sim runs. Throat hurts from talking. So good. All right, let's simulate these lineups. Contest sim is being run. Don't forget, signing up at BetMGM, bet 5, get 150 instantly in bonus bets. 3 bonus bets, $50 a piece. Oh, it's a good day, folks. Man, so dangerously close to the big dub yesterday. That would have been fun. Would have been fun. Unfortunately, no dice. Almost there on the FanDuel lineups. Keep your eyes peeled. They're going to pop up. We're going to give out the best lineup in ROI and the individual exposures that we see after running our FanDuel sims. 10:53 a.m. By the way, this is the exact tool I used last night to finish 4th. Late swap tool in particular was vital in getting away from all the slop that you shouldn't have anymore. Like, what's his name? Freeman Liberty? Liberty Bibbity? I don't know. Almost there. Compiling results. Final run of the Sims for FanDuel. Here we are. We will quick favorite the top 150. Top lineup on FanDuel to start the day: Jalen Green and Jordan Goodwin, Luke Kennard and Dylan Brooks, Kyle Kuzma and John Conchar, Giannis, Aldama, and Miles Turner. In terms of exposure, 90% to Dylan Brooks, 70% to John Conchar, 65% to Jalen Green, 55% to Jeff Green, Santi Aldama, Luke Kennard, Rudy Gobert, and Lamar Stevens, all in the 40s. That, my friends, is another strategy show in the books. Hell of a day. We're hitting our time marks perfectly. Again, NHL strategy show at 2 p.m. later today. 5:30 for the deeper dive, 6:30 for live before lock, 7:30 for our playback stream. I wish you guys nothing but the best in your contest tonight. I'm hoping I just do it again and get myself right back up to the top. But if I can't do it, I hope it ends up being one of you guys. If you haven't listened on podcast feeds yet, the show will be up on podcast every single day. Good luck, everybody. I'll talk to you later. This is the NBA Strategy Show.